Resilience, not what it seems to be. Resilience has been envisioned by humans as a positive trait that can benefit a person in many ways. When a person thinks of resilience, they imagine a person who has gone through a difficult situation in the past and has learned how to grow and become stronger as a result of it. What many don't realize is that resilience actually harnesses many negative impacts that have irreversibly changed our society as well as countless individuals' lives. So, my research question is, how has resilience negatively impacted our society as well as individuals? First off, however, my argument is connected to the stimulus as it discusses the topic of resilience. My argument discusses the negative impacts of resilience on an individual as well as our society. The two stimulus materials that my argument is related to are stimuli 3 and 6. My argument relates to stimulus 3 as it discusses how modern technology may not be the solution to all of our problems related to natural disasters. My argument explains how resilience is negative in the development of technologies, as it results in the abandonment of the ancient creations made by our ancestors. My argument is also related to stimulus 6, as it discusses. My argument is also related to stimulus 6. Stimulus 6 discusses how resilience is negative, and it also reveals the hidden dark side of this trait. This essay, or my essay, drew a lot of information from this essay, and it helped build the foundation for my argument. Claim 1, a misinterpretation of resilience. People have envisioned resilience as a positive characteristic for years, but contradictory to popular belief, it can be a negative thing in some circumstances. One such circumstance is when a person becomes overly resilient or overuses the trait. According to the Working Capital Review, an organization that looks into traits and characteristics that benefit or harm workplaces, quote, resilience is developed due to experiencing hardship. An over-reliance on any admirable trait turns strength into weakness quickly, end quote. The critical point here is that when one is overly reliant on a trait such as resilience, it can turn it into a weakness. This quote also shows how this characteristic resembles an admirable trait when in reality it is not. Helena Winston, a psychosomatic medical practitioner and specialist in behavioral science, states that, quote, on the surface, resilience appears to be an admirable trait, but the term resilience has a history that must be understood if we are to understand the ways in which it is operating in the present. Despite these positive understandings of resilience, this does not mean that resilience is always inherently an essential, good, or natural process, end quote. Again, on the surface, resilience seems to be a very valuable characteristic that can benefit a person in many ways, but this is clearly a myth. Even though people see it as a positive characteristic, it doesn't mean that it really is. And this has led to people thinking that the more resilient they are, the better. There are also many downsides to a person becoming overly resilient. One example is that a person can become overly tolerant of adversity. If a person never listens to any criticism given to them by others, even if that could potentially benefit them, it can be detrimental to them and their future. According to Derek Luss, a writer for the Harvard Business Review, quote, extreme resilience could drive people to become overly persistent with unattainable goals. Although we tend to celebrate individuals who aim higher, dream big, it is usually more effective to adjust one's goals to achievable levels, end quote. Again, this quote shows the issues with the fact that we praise people who become overly resilient. Becoming tolerant of adversity may seem positive at first, but never changing who you are based on feedback from others can be detrimental to you, your future, as well as your performance in the workplace. Additionally, there are direct correlations between the amount of resilience a person has and the mental health of that person. According to Marie Tobin, professor of psychiatry and behavioral neuroscience at the University of Chicago, quote, the role of resilience in mediating the negative effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on the mental health of the U.S. woman is poorly understood. Resilience was significantly associated with greater odds of depression symptoms, anxiety symptoms, and pandemic-related stress, end quote. Having an excess amount of resilience leads to poor mental health and high levels of stress and anxiety as a result of people focusing on the negative. Claim 2, the ways in which resilience negatively affects our society. Secondly, the positive image that people have of resilience doesn't just affect individuals, it affects our entire society. The main way that resilience affects our society is in industrial development and technologies used to avoid crises and other natural disasters. According to Julia Watson, an architect and Harvard graduate, quote, all across the globe, I've seen cultures who have been living with floods for thousands of years by evolving these ancient technologies that allow them to work with the water. In our rush towards the future, we tend to forget about the past. End quote. Humanity has survived and persevered through countless crises in the past, using innovation and intelligence. But we've become so focused on becoming as resilient as possible to these natural disasters that we've forgotten what our ancestors did in the past, and I've also forgotten about what technologies they developed. In conclusion, resilience is definitively not exclusively a positive characteristic. Becoming over-resilient has numerous negative impacts on an individual. This is evident in the differentiation between the different amounts of resilience that people have. Resilience is also misinterpreted as a result of a person going through a difficult time in the past. This trait leads to countless negative impacts on a person's personality and performance in the workplace. It can lead to increased procrastination, higher levels of stress and anxiety, as well as poor leadership and management skills. This trait also leads to a person's chance of getting depression and can increase the symptoms of depression if they already have it. Having too much resilience has also led to negative outcomes in our society as well. Industrialization and rapid modernization have led to our society trying to become as resilient as possible towards natural disasters that have affected humans for centuries. Readopting the ancient methods used by our ancestors could be one potential solution to many of the problems our society faces today. Overall, resilience as a trait that has been drastically misunderstood by our society and has led to many hidden consequences that have gone unnoticed as a result of our misconception of this harmful trait. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I've got a couple of questions for you, and then we'll wrap this thing up.
All right.
Perfect. So the first question is, tell us how your research question evolved from the time you first thought of what you were going to write about all the way up to now.
Yeah, so initially, my research question just asked how resilience negatively affects individuals, and as I continued my research, I realized that I needed to develop my argument and strengthen it by pointing out how it affects our entire society. So I decided to change my research question into how has resilience negatively affected our entire society as well as individuals.
Okay, excellent. And then as a follow-up to that, what additional questions emerged during the research process that are interesting to you now?
Yeah, so one of the biggest questions that emerged from my research is why our society is becoming overly resilient instead of how it's becoming overly resilient. So, and as I researched, I decided I wanted to put more research towards this question as well, and I found out that it's because we're an economy-based society and we have become so focused on creating what makes the most money instead of creating what is most practical.
Okay, excellent.